Hello, John. Would you mind introducing yourself in about 3 sentences or so?
Yeah, greetings. Good day. It's nice to be here. Our core business is all about human energy and driving energy in organizations and driving performance. And hopefully we'll talk about it a little bit later, but it's about generating the magic. And I've been doing this for about 20 years, and I absolutely love doing it.
So what actually made you to start your own business?
Well, when I started consulting a long time ago, about 20 years ago, I worked for an international consultancy. And I noticed that as smart as the consultants were, we always used to be talking about the theory and not about the action. And I realized that there was a big gap in the market in getting people to change their behavior. It's very easy to sit and read a book or listen to a lecture, but to actually change people's behavior takes something special. And that's what we focused on, is developing special techniques to change behavior, to change performance.
So what is it about the program, a high energy program that you're putting on? What does it give to the people? Why should people attend such a program, or think a company should think about sending their managers through such a program?
Well, we have a very simple model that we call the organizational energy model. And just to give you some background, the average company in Europe only lasts 12 years. So it's quite clear that we've never really developed a deep understanding of what makes an organization survive. But what we do know is that an organization is driven by human energy. So the higher the energy, the greater the motivation, the greater the customer service, and so on. So the key to organizational survival is the ability to evolve and to change all the time and to adapt to the changing environment and market and so on. And we've developed the model, which is a very simple one, where we say that the organization's energy drives its performance. So a low energy organization, and I don't know if you have any low energy organizations in Prague, you may have some state companies, perhaps a rail company or something like that might have low energy, I don't know. And you'll see that culture, that low energy culture, will drive that business and people's behavior. Whereas if you take a high energy company, let's say Formula One, take Ferrari or something like that, you'll see that everybody performs at a much higher level. So you have two cultures or two DNAs, a low energy one and a high energy one. And the high energy culture will drive different behavior to the low energy one. So our model is quite simple. If an organization wants to survive, we say the leadership energy drives the organizational energy. And if you can change the leadership energy, it'll change the organizational energy, which is the level of motivation and desire and innovation and so on. And if you can drive those two, then you can get increased customer satisfaction and with it increased profitability, which of course is extremely important in the current market.
How do you actually do that? How do you increase the energy in the company? Because as you mentioned, there are companies who are low energy and high energy. How do you increase the energy of the company that has low energy?
The most important thing is to understand what actually drives company culture. And what we've learned over the years is that every organization has a unique sort of DNA profile. And that's supported by what we call an equilibrium level of energy. So if a company has a low energy level, let's say a 55%, it will actually do everything consciously and unconsciously to maintain that level of 55%. So one has to know what the rules are and what we call the meta rules, or the unconscious rules, which bind that culture. So people think it's the explicit rules of we do it this way or you must do it that way which drive the culture, but we found it's not so. So a simple example would be everybody would agree that innovation really matters. And managers will say, yes, we're very innovative in this company. But the meta rule or the unconscious rule or the shadow, if you like, may be the opposite. So in an organization, the meta rule might be do not be innovative. And that might be supported by a lot of politics and a fear culture and so on. So on the one hand, the company thinks it's innovative, but actually the meta rule says that it is not so. So part of our job is to identify those meta rules and to change those meta rules. And one of the key tools that we've designed and developed over the years is something that we call an energy fractal. Now, an energy fractal is a simple behavior repeated at regular intervals. And if we look into biology generally and you look at the process of evolution, you'll see that wherever you have repetition and you have variation and you have selection, you get evolution, and you must get evolution. And we've used that principle to change behavior. So behavior does not change because you think you're going to change. It changes because you put new simple practices in place that you repeat with very high iteration and discipline.
Could you give me a simple example of the energy fractal?
Yeah, one that we often use is that of fitness, physical fitness. So, we might say that the average leader's fitness, average manager is 50% physically fit. An energy fractal, let's say, would be to go to the gym 4 times a week for 45 minutes. Now, if he completes that program, going 4 times a week, let's say for 6 months, we talk about the first order impact of the fractal. And the first order is the linear or logical impact, which is increased fitness. But there's also the second order impact. And the second order impact is what is the impact of the first order impact. So if the leader is physically fitter after 6 months, he's got more serotonin and dopamine floating around his brain, so he's more inspired, he's got less stress, he's more positive. So the impact on his employees or team members is likely to be positive. So they will be more motivated. And if they're more motivated, then the customers are likely to be more motivated. And if the customers are more motivated and more satisfied and more loyal, then the profitability will increase as well. So you can see from a simple fractal, energy fractal, there is a complex result. And that's exactly how nature works. Nature builds its complexity from the high repetition of simple building blocks. So even as a human being, Monica, you're made up of molecules that are exactly the same as my molecules, but we're not the same. So what nature does is takes these simple fractal shapes, and with high iteration and the addition of nature's own magic, you generate the complexity. And that's exactly the principle that we apply.
I see. This seems to be the energy fractal. It's the repetition of a simple action at regular intervals.
Correct.
What is the success rate? To me, it sounds fairly simple to follow. Do you have quite high success rate of people going through such a program and actually changing their energy level into higher?
Over the years, we've been using this principle for 16 years now. So we've had tremendous success at different levels. At the system level, so we've helped a bank with 30,000 people change its performance. So this was a bank that was amalgamated with 4 banks, 3 of which were losing money at the time. And we applied a certain fractal principle where all the leaders, instead of being inwardly focused and fairly political, were now promoted based purely on their ability to generate good customer service and financial performance. So a lot of people were being promoted overnight, and a lot of people were being moved out of the system. And that organization moved from a very low energy level to a highly profitable position with a very high energy level. In fact, it won the award a few years later for the best company to work for. So the principle can apply at a systems level, where you apply the energy fractal as a new rule, or it can apply at an individual level. So if we're doing coaching with a leader, let's say a leader, a lot of A-type personality leaders are fairly aggressive in their demeanor, and they may not be very good listeners. They may interrupt a great deal. So the energy fractal we would give them is you must wait until the person you're speaking to has finished speaking, count to 3, and ask a question. And this works remarkably well, because if the leader interrupts, then the person that's being interrupted becomes anxious, and the whole thing sort of declines into a kind of not a very creative conversation. But if the leader now learns to listen, the person that is doing the speaking is more relaxed, more intelligent, thinks the leader is wiser, and so on. So it has a second order impact, which is very powerful. So the fractal principle applies to everything in life. In fact, it applies to everything that we do, from brushing our teeth to using language to religion, whatever it is. Everything that we have in our human history, our human evolution, is really based on fractals. Either a fractal belief or a fractal action, which is repeated at high levels of iteration. So what we're driving at is we're giving the leaders the power to change their behavior and the behavior of the system to increase the performance.
You've been working in the Czech Republic for the past 3 years. What do you see among the Czech managers, and how do you think, or what would you recommend terms of their leadership and their management?
Well, I love coming to the Czech Republic, the beautiful people, and I love the history of the town, and I love the old streets. And outside here we've got cobblestones that I think are 600 years old or whatever it may be. So there's a natural historic beauty here. It's also a town where there's been great music and great science and great literature and great poetry and so on. So there's an intellectual heritage here which I enjoy tremendously. And I think that is in the Czech people. So the Czech people can be very deep thinking, and I think they enjoy new concepts, and they can be deeply philosophical. If I were to make a general comment about the Czech men in particular, I would say that they have what I call, and I say this openly, they have this wonderful Czech poker face. So they have this sort of blank look where you're not quite sure what they're thinking, what they're not thinking, and so on. And I think it's very important for any outsider coming into the Czech Republic, into Prague, to understand this. It's not that they're not thinking, it's that you've got to get through to them a little bit. And very often, if you go into a pub in the evening, whatever, and have a few beers, there's a completely different personality that comes out. So I see the Czech people as being very innovative. There's quite a strong sort of pioneering spirit in there. And what I particularly like is the sense of the maverick, that they don't particularly like authority, and this may have something to do with the history. You had the Russians here and the Germans here and goodness knows who else here. So I think there is a sense that, yes, we like our freedom. And I particularly like that. And I think that's what the Czech people should exploit, because we're in a challenging market at the moment, and there's no doubt in the current economic climate that the future is going to be based on innovation. We have to be able to compete with China and India and Asia, and I think that the Czech people have got that spirit, that pioneering spirit. And my recommendation, if I were to be allowed to give a recommendation to Czech people, it would be to fully exploit that history and that sense of being a maverick and being able to kind of do anything if they want to.
The last question I would have for you is, what would you like your name and your personality be connected with in regards to the methodology?
That's an interesting question. I would say it's not so much my name that I would like to be remembered by anybody, but what I would like, because this concept of the energy fractal we've used with thousands of people over the years, and it's been incredibly successful where people have wanted to change. And in a sense, sometimes the change is more revolutionary than evolutionary. So the fractal, we always say to people, you take a simple fractal and you put it in place, nature will add the magic and it will generate the complexity for you. So if anything is to be remembered, it's the people who can apply the fractals and they generate the magic. So to me, if they can generate beauty in their lives and generate some magic in their lives from the principle of the energy fractal, that's what I would like to be remembered.
Great. Thank you, John.
It's been a great pleasure. Nice talking to you.